So this
Denver's Mayor Mike
next
Johnson.
story is about migrants, because there's a lot of changes that's happening with the migrant shelters. You guys got to let me know what's going on in your cities, because we seeing that slowly but surely the rate of migrants signing up to come into new shelters is decreasing. The rate of migrants coming into shelters at some of these cities is decreasing. So you know what that means? These migrants is moving into your city, your town, man, your neighborhood. We already seen in the Bronx, they had 2 stores crammed up with, 40 in one, 75 to 80 migrants in another. And they're saying that some of these migrants are finally starting to find housing. They're coming together and they're finding housing, and they're leaving some of these migrant shelters. At the same time, we see states are starting to be divided. I mean, New York is still looking to open new locations. Boston just opened a new location, while Denver and Chicago, they're looking to shut things down and save money on their budget. So this divide of states going in different directions will certainly impact migrants and where they migrate to, the locations that they plan to plan their last destination. Because if they hear things are getting tough in Chicago, Colorado, Denver, if you're in California, you might want to head your way to New York, because in San Diego and different parts of California, they're also shutting down shelters. So let us know your thoughts, man. Let us know your thoughts. Do you think things are going to get crazy? Because we've seen down in San Francisco, they were just fine with dropping 400 people off into the streets with nowhere to go. 400 people a day? Come on, with nowhere to go, just sleeping on the streets? This may begin to cause chaos in certain neighborhoods. So let us know your thoughts, because cities are moving to go in different directions. And we're going to sit back and we're going to see the reaction of it.
Again, giving an update on the migrant situation in Denver earlier this morning.
Yeah, so initially he comes into office tackling the homeless crisis, not realizing a migrant crisis always going to happen. Carly Moore was there this morning as the mayor spoke. So what were his big announcements here, Carly?
Drew, Katie, good morning. The big announcement is that the mayor plans to close 4 shelters, hoping to reduce the amount of money spent on this crisis. Here's what you need to know this morning. Basically, he's consolidating the amount of resources. So 4 migrant shelters are expected to be closed, 1 every week for the next month. According to the mayor, closing those shelters will save the city $60 million. That means that projected $180 million needed for migrant support we've been talking about will drop to $120 million. Johnston said it will be accomplished over a 4-tier system, reinstituting length of stay limits, boosting case management supports, connecting with networks outside of the city, and increasing work authorization opportunities. Now, Johnston said with shelters closing, no one will technically be kicked out. They will simply be moved to another shelter to stay out their limit. The main reason.
Wow. So they're trying to reduce costs. They're trying to save, because we see out there they're spending $150 million, $200 million on their budget just for the migrant crisis, man. So we see cities, as we're getting deeper and deeper into this election year, they're trying to make moves to save money on the budget. We also see the same thing happening down in Chicago. They're also making moves to close down and consolidate migrant shelters now. I wonder if things are going to get bad, or if we're going to see a lot of illegal spaces where people are just going to be crammed into apartments and crammed into small spaces that they pay on their own.
The city of Chicago has closed 4 temporary migrant shelters, saying the individuals have been moved to other shelters. The sites were in North Park, Lakeview, North Lawndale, and downtown. City officials say the closings will equal to about $19 million in savings over the course of a year. That includes the cost of the leases, staffing, food, and laundry services. At this time, there are no plans to reopen the sites as the population being housed in city migrant shelters have been continuously decreasing since the start of this year.
You heard it. The migrant shelters are decreasing in the number of incoming migrants that they receive. Now, this is just in Chicago and in Denver. We already seen in San Diego and different parts of California, they said, no, we just shutting it down. No more shelters. But the thing about California is people are still crossing the border from there, while migrants are being dropped off from Arizona and Texas, and they're closing shelters down. But at least we see in New York and Boston, they didn't get the memo. They're still opening up shelters. Let's take a look at Boston and let us know your thoughts. Should we just start moving to close things down and put pressure on these migrants? Or should we help and expand shelters, which would impact your tax dollar? Either way, we need a solution. Because if we're closing down shelters and consolidating things, they need to make it available for these migrants to work. So then they can have their own housing. Because we can't just be shutting down shelters and then dropping people off into the streets 400 a day like they're doing in San Diego. Because trust me, what TV? We're following San Diego. Because if they continue to drop people off without housing, yeah, something is bound to happen.
The state is working to open a new shelter to house the overflow of migrants coming to the area, this time here in Fort Point. It's a decision that seems to be dividing the community.
I don't like it. They're giving them all these benefits and people here homeless and need jobs and not getting nothing.
It's better to place them someplace, they have a roof over their head instead of being on the streets.
The housing of migrants continuing to cause controversy in the Bay State. The latest focal point, Farnsworth Street in Fort Point. It's a site Governor Maura Healey's administration had been eyeing, working with nonprofits in the affluent Boston neighborhood to shelter migrant families and pregnant women.
We continue to need to find safe housing.
The building belongs to the Unitarian Universalist Association, and it's working with United Way and the state to house the overflow of migrants who need a place to spend the nights. This after the state, which is the only one in the country with a right to shelter law, reached shelter capacity in November with 7,500 families.
I just don't know how long it's going to take to get everything operationalized and, work things out with the community, work things out with the city.
However, that's where some Fort Point residents have an issue with the governor. While some residents we spoke to don't mind the move, others who have reservations complain they have not been consulted.
It just seems like people are being thrown into a building with no regard for the safety. We know nothing about the background, about the medical history, and it just seems dangerous.
Nobody wants anything in their backyard, but it's a kind of a humanitarian crisis right now in our city. So,
wow. Do you have the same thoughts? Do you think this is a humanitarian crisis that needs to be addressed and dealt with by the tax dollar and the American people? Or do you think no more shelters because this promotes bad activity? Because we have veterans and citizens across America who still can't afford affordable housing. So let us know your thoughts. Should we be shutting down shelters? Or in some type of capacity, should we keep the wheels going and keep some of these shelters open? Because if we're going to be dumping people out into these cold streets, Chicago is cold. New York is cold. Boston, cold. Denver, hella cold. So where we see these sanctuary cities, it's pretty much cold. If we're going to be just dropping people off outside on the streets and we refuse to have shelter, it might create chaos, unwanted chaos that we do not want. So let us know what you want. And again, tap in, tap in, tap in. Listen, we have no clue why you would want to go anywhere else to get your news. So tap in with us, tap in with us. We the best news reaction channel. We're going to bring you the stories and we're going to break them down for you like no one else is.